Welcome everyone to today's webinar on regional transformations, collaborative planning approaches for post-mine land use, managing change and economic transitions. My name's Tom Measham and I'm the Research Director for CLC Time, and we have a fabulous lineup today who I'll just introduce in a moment. But to begin with, I'd like to acknowledge the country that we're on here, which for me is the Yagara and Turrbal people in the Brisbane area. And I extend that acknowledgement to all the lands on which we're meeting today across the country, wherever you are. So I'd like to introduce the panel only very briefly. We've got Jess Reeves, who will be speaking first, followed by Taryn Kong, and then Raquel Tardin Coelho, who will be speaking as a third speaker. This is a new format for us for CLC Time. So really what we've done is we're taking three projects and we've asked the three project leaders four specific questions around the regions they've been working in and the findings they're having today and the voices that they're listening to, and all about the regional collaborative planning approaches that they're doing. So before we get on with our first speaker, I will just say one thing, and that is that we have a new regional collaboration toolkit, and this project in many ways is actually symbolic of this new toolkit, which we'll be posting on the chat, and you can have a look at it on our website after the webinar. And what I will also do is ask you to hold questions until the end. So we have three speakers, they're short presentations, and some of the questions might actually be spanning more than one presentation. So we'll hold the questions to the end, and just please place your questions in the chat. So you can place them as you go, and then we'll facilitate the dialogue for the questions when we have finished Raquel's talk. So on that note, what I'll do is hand over to Jess, who will be taking us through the first part of the presentation. Thank you.
Many thanks, Tom, and welcome everybody. Lovely to see so many names listed here. I can't see your faces. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Gunai country and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And the work that I'm speaking with you about today is work that I've undertaken with my colleague Tira Ferran from the CSIRO on what's going to become of the Latrobe Valley post coal mining. So it's a collaborative planning project for future land use post brown coal mining. This is just a beautiful artwork that one of my friends and colleagues, Pollyanna, did of what a potential future might look like. So in terms of where this project is taking place, many of you will be familiar with the Latrobe Valley, but for those of you who are not, we're talking about Gippsland, which is in the southeast corner of Australia. Gippsland takes up about a tenth of the state of Victoria, and the Latrobe Valley is in here. We have the major townships of Moe Newborough, Morwell and Traralgon, and the sites that we're looking at are these grey areas around the three large open cut brown coal mines. And so you'll notice that these grey areas, including what is currently the Hazelwood Pondage, take up about a similar area to the current townships, which are home to around 80,000 people, and the size of the mine voids themselves. So it's a really substantive piece of land that we are looking at in here. Also, this is, we've got Melbourne, about an hour and a half to the west, and we have the Gippsland Lakes about an hour to the east as well. So really significant part of the Victorian landscape. And these grey areas that we're focusing on take up about 10,000 hectares of land. So I'm driving the slides as well here, so I'm trying to keep hold of things. In terms of the key issues that we were asked to address, there's the Latrobe Valley is one of the most consulted regions in Australia, and there's a criticism that it's usually the same people who are getting them in the room being asked the same sorts of questions. Also, questions that have been asked in the past of the community have been fairly non-binding, so having a really open-ended, what would you like to see here, without any ability to implement that, which gives the communities a lack of agency, which they're already feeling around the determination of the final mine voids themselves. There's also, whilst there's a lot of knowledge around energy generation and mining within the community, there's quite a lack of knowledge around mine rehabilitation or potential future land uses as well, and quite a distinct lack of trust both for government and for industry, given previous privatisation of the power industry and also the significant mine fire that we had over 10 years ago here. And the other real question is, whose future are we looking at here? Are we looking at the future of the current workers or the future of future generations? And we addressed each of these in how we designed the project. So we wanted to ensure that whilst we were taking people's time in terms of their insights and their intellectual properties, we're getting their ideas, we wanted to demonstrate that there could be tangible outcomes that could be realised. We took a great deal of effort into how we selected the people to participate to ensure that they were truly representative and involving young people and First Nations people's voices in particular. And we took an authentic co-design approach with the operators, with the local government authorities, with the relevant authorities in this region and the community as well. We also had a commitment throughout the project that any questions that came up from the community or other participants would be answered, if not in the sessions, and we'd be taken on notice and find an answer. And we tried to build up trust through this answering process, but also visits to the sites. And particularly for First Nations people, this was the first time that most of them had actually been on site, even though it's their country. So whose voices? As I mentioned, we work with 3 separate segments within the community. And any of you who are involved in the project, we referred to the donuts as being the area of land around the holes themselves, hence the reference to the donuts. But we had an Indigenous reference group, which comprised 42 individual participants. We run several sessions both on country and in the Registered Aboriginal Parties offices. We ran a specific youth design summit over 2 days for local high school students, and we also had a community panel that was taken through a ballot process and seemed to be demographically representative and ensure that there was representation across the region, and we worked with them over 5 sessions. In terms of the insights, we saw that there's real benefit in creating an independent space. So the position of us as independent researchers, so outside of the regulatory framework, allowed a space for considered deliberation. So it wasn't a requirement. These are things that an activity that the various parties chose to participate in, and that gave them some freedom to explore ideas and build connections that they might not have been able to do otherwise. But what was really important was to co-design the scope with the key partners who have real skin in the game. So this co-design process ensured that the ideas that we were prosecuting through the deliberative process were things that were actually feasible. So we read through all the regional development strategies for the region. We worked with each of the operators to see what types of land uses would be suitable on each of their sites, and from that built the basis for the deliberation. So it really was not open-ended. We were asked then to provide an output that was definitely evidence-based, but also usable and useful. So not just a theoretical thing, but something that could actually be taken off and used in a range of different strategic planning or closure planning documents. So it needed to be really practical as well. Another key insight was there is an awful lot of knowledgeable and passionate people within each of our communities, and providing platforms for those ideas to be explored. We learned so much. Everyone learned so much from this process. And the participants felt that as well. They learnt from each other and they felt pride in participating in this process. And our communities do actually want to be really informed. We tend to be a little bit protective of our communities and averse to objections, but most of them really just want to understand what's happening. So providing spaces and providing information to enable people to engage more will bring more people forward. And everyone we spoke to simply wants a better future for the next generation, and are proud of the contribution that the Latrobe Valley has made to the prosperity of Victoria, but also want to ensure that a positive legacy is left behind from that, not 3 holes in the ground. So from this, it was important that the past contributions have been acknowledged and not just erased. They're proud of the past that has been, but want to have a positive future as well. and to ensure that whatever future comes has a broader range of opportunities for a broader member of communities. So it's not just about replacing jobs for the current workers, it's enabling more people to have active participation in economic activity going forward. But for this to be successful, you need to have a clear shared vision and somebody to drive it. In terms of the other question that we were asked, which is the most important things that you need to consider in post-mine planning and diversification, I would say being really clear on whose future you are planning for, and they could have different ideas. Are you planning for people within this region, or are you planning for voters that might be in the capital cities or the shareholders of the companies, or are you planning for the rights holders that are going to stay in place? And then thinking about where these responsibilities lie, and particularly who is going to be responsible for this land in the future. So who is going to carry this project forward? It's not necessarily the current licensees that have those sites. Obviously, they're required to leave these sites in a safe, stable and sustainable state, but they're not economic developers. They're not there to create the future. That's for somebody else to step in. And there's a real opportunity, particularly in Victoria, where First Nations people have been largely overlooked when these mines were first developed. There's a real opportunity for their rights and their aspirations to be forefront at what comes next. And obviously, the sooner that we have some determination about what the final landforms will be, the better informed the future land use planning can be. So this one might take, oh, there we go, nice and quick. In terms of what people need to make a decision, and this is some beautiful artwork that my colleagues Kyle Bush and Candace put together based on the outcomes of the deliberations. People need a vision, and they need a vision that they can see themselves in and to be able to share and discuss with others. So thank you for that. And I'd also like to thank the many partners that we've had in this project, our project partners, but also the many community members who participated in the development of this research. Thank you. And I will hand over to Taryn.
Thanks, Jess. And Taryn, you want to go ahead with the next part of the presentation?
Yes, thank you, Jess, and thank you, Tom. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are in the country. I am a research scientist at CSIRO, and I'm joining you from Meanjin, where the traditional custodians are the Turrbal and Yagara people. And I also want to pay my respect to their elders, past and present. I'm here speaking on behalf of a team sharing our learnings and reflections on a project that has just recently been completed. The project is identifying future economic development pathways for mining regions and increasing transition capacity. Next slide, please. Jess, next slide. Thank you. So where we worked in, we worked in 2 case study areas representing different parts of the resource value chain. Bowen Basin is in central Queensland and Bell Bay in northeastern Tasmania. I put here some data about these 2 case study areas just to show that they're very different. And even within each region, there's a lot of diversity and local nuances. I'm not going to read you the stats on the slide, but just to give you a picture, in Bowen Basin, we're covering a huge area, 7 LGAs. And the gross regional product there is about 10 times of that in Bell Bay. So we're talking about 2 regions with very different scales. The medium incomes also differ quite a bit in terms of the 2 regions. The industry compositions in Bowen Basin, being that it has the largest economic demonstrated resource of black coal, mining is huge employment sector, but service industry is also important, as well as agriculture and agriculture and tourism. In Bell Bay, you have the service industry as the largest employing sector. That includes health, education, social services. But manufacturing, particularly in metal smelter, is huge in Georgetown, as well as agriculture in Dorset. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we have 2 advisory groups, one in each case study area, to help guide the project team to better understand what are the key issues that they want this research project to help address. At the start of the project, we thought mine closure was going to be a focus, but it turns out to be not so much as the center of their attention because they're in different parts of the resource value chain and also in different parts of the life cycle of mining. In Bowen Basin, we were asked, the interest there were actually around how to plan for diversifications, particularly around planning for workforce that can support future development, including emerging industries such as renewable energy, biomanufacturing. Whereas in Bell Bay, they were really interested to understand how to better prepare for closure of a major employer, such as Bell Bay Aluminium and Liberty Bell Bay, because these employers employ hundreds of workers. They want to better understand what will be potential social and economic impacts if one of these employers were to close down. So we have developed a local scale analytical tool and use a collaborative process to test these tools with participants from both case study areas. Next slide, please. So whose voice are we hearing in terms of some of the insights that are shared today? We worked with, in total, 50 participants, unique participants across 13 sectors in Bowen Basin and 18 participants across 6 sectors in Bell Bay. And we engage with them mainly in workshops and a series of interviews that focus on regional workforce planning and development questions. As you can see in the graphs here, we have most of the participants coming from the government sector, mainly from the local level, but also we have some participation from state and Commonwealth government. And also a lot of industry participants and some from education sector, education and training, as well as non-for-profit organizations that are involved in regional development. Next slide, please. Key insights. So even though here I put down challenges, of course, our participants share much more than just challenges with us. In fact, they share their perspectives on regional development opportunities, where they see strengths and capacity in dealing with changes in the future, ideas for solutions to address some of these challenges, and also examples from existing successful programs and initiatives. But what I want to put here, because of, due to limited time, is that what we notice is that some of the challenges that they share with us are complex and are at system levels. For example, both regions deal with the challenge of workforce and skill shortages. And in fact, this challenge has been acknowledged in Queensland Workforce Strategy as well as the Greater Whitsunday Workforce Development Playbook. They also have to deal with the challenge of how to attract and retain talents in the area. And there are different factors contributing to this challenge. In Bowen Basin, you have a strong fivefold dynamic, fly in, fly out, whereby some people see that that's contributing to employer not putting a lot of investment in local residents because of the availability of workforce from elsewhere. the issue around housing shortages is also contributing to the difficulty of bringing people to grow the workforce. In Bell Bay, you have the dynamic around aging population, where the median age there is about 5 to 7 years above the national average. You have also low workforce participation, particularly in Georgetown and Dorset. And some participants voice the issue around disengaged youth, contributing to not able to meet the demands of workforce need. The other challenge that they voice is around redeployment. Of course, they understand dealing with transitions. They want to help the current workforce to better prepare for adapting to new industries or new opportunities, but they also recognize the complexity in doing that, because these are involving personal choices, personal preferences, as well as their different expectations and also requirements around qualifications. For planners and developers, there's also the challenge around information uncertainty, not knowing exactly the type of skills that are needed, which skills will be transferable, and exactly how many workers are needed over exactly what period of time. Makes planning tricky. And the third challenge that's voiced was around the issue of capability gaps and resource constraints of local regional planners and practitioners. They recognize that the challenge that they face are immense, that needs the resource and collaboration from states as well as Commonwealth governments. And that also some participant voice the perceptions of siloing at play at times between different level of governments and sometimes even within the same level of government, which make coordinated effort difficult in addressing these challenges. Next slide, please. So I have two ways of answering these questions about what do people need to make decisions. One, of course, we need better information and tools. And in our interviews about regional workforce planning development, our participants identify that there's gap around having tools that can provide predictive, more future-looking information, and that can be interactive. The kind of tool that allow them to put in or explore different scenarios, simulation type of tool. The other bit is around having information that is at a more granular level. For example, to support workforce planning, they really need information at the skill level, at the role level, rather than just the number of employees that's needed. Another area of gaps that could be addressed is having better integrations among different data sources, whether it be from different government departments or different industries. So better harmonizations across these different information and data sources. That way, to help the planners and practitioners to be able to see a more integrated picture. And of course, a lot of data about past, which is challenging when they're trying to plan for something that is emerging, particularly workforce needs and supply for emerging industries. The second way I was going to answer this question is that, well, to make decisions is not just information and tool. It's also about the process and the way by which we make decisions. And this includes like whose voices are we including, whose values and whose knowledge are included in the process. This green box here shows that actually a number of our participants have raised the importance of including local knowledge in making decisions, and that oftentimes these local knowledge don't get represented well in tools and information that tend to quantify everything or simplify information. So next slide, please. And last questions around what are the key considerations for supporting regional communities to future-proof? So yes, improving our information and tools are really important, but as we learned from this project, that building the human and institutional capability to make decisions with uncertainty is also important, because there will never be a tool or a set of information that will completely eliminate uncertainty. There will always be some level of uncertainty. So it's about how to help decision makers to navigate that uncertainty. And also, how do we help practitioners and planners to, at different level, to collaborate better, so that they can pull together their knowledge and their resources to match the scale of the complexity of challenges that they're facing. And thirdly, is that the context in which they operate in, it's constantly shifting. Shifting in terms of influence by what's happening at national scale, what's happening at global scale. So they constantly, even the solution they plan doesn't necessarily stay the same through time. Is how can they learn collectively and be able to adapt agilely to navigate this constantly shifting landscape in which they operate. Next slide, please. So we just, our project has just newly published the technical report and other resources that is now available. You can scan this QR code to access the resource. And here are pictures of the lovely team that I have the privilege to work with. And lastly, wants to thank, next slide, please, sorry. Just thank all the project partners, advisory groups, participants, particularly those from the First Nations group, and the RCEAM for making this project possible and all their contribution. Thank you. Raquel?
Thanks, Darren. So Raquel, if you'd like to take us through the third part of the presentation, and just a reminder about putting any questions you have in the chat. But I've already got a couple in my mind, so because I've been listening intensely. Go ahead, Raquel.
Thank you, Tom. And good morning, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today to show the results of the work package 2 of a broader project on regional cumulative effects assessment and management. This work package 2 is about Indigenous involvement in regional cumulative effects assessment and management, which we are calling RCEAM. And first of all, I would like to pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging from the Whadjuk Noongar and the Puntu Kuntiku Brahma and Pinigura peoples. Jess, next slide, please. We can ask, what is regional cumulative effects assessment and management? This is the assessment of combined effects of multiple development stresses at a regional scale. It means that we are not talking about one project and some effects related to this project in one location. We are talking about multiple projects, multiple effects at a regional scale. And what is Indigenous involvement in RCEAM? I brought here 2 maps. One is about the location of mining developments in Australia, and the other one is the native title map of Australia. And what we can see is that most of the mining developments, they occur on indigenous lands. And our question is how indigenous peoples as rights holders, they see cumulative effects assessment and management on their lands, how they could assess and manage those effects, and what would be the value added by assessing and managing those cumulative effects through an indigenous lenses to sustainability for everybody, for the indigenous communities and for all people involved in those developments, directly or indirectly. So what is indigenous involvement in RCEAM? It's not about consultation. It's not about integrating indigenous knowledge or assimilating indigenous knowledge into Western science frameworks. It is about shared authority in decision-making, and it's about creating a third space where indigenous and non-indigenous assessments interact and coexist. Basically, it's about developing indigenous RCEAM in parallel with Western science RCEAM and creating this third space for dialogue and negotiation. So this is the approach of the project. Just next one, please. The key issues addressed by the project is what it would be. We didn't know about it. So it's about reframing the framework, what is being done elsewhere. So we did a huge literature review, and mainly we saw that in Canada and Norway, the RCEAM process and frameworks are more developed. So we have something elsewhere as well, but there we had most of the literature comes from there. So what could we take from this literature review? First, what would be the principles for RCEAM, the criteria and parameters, and we created our own RCEAM framework, a comprehensive framework. And by doing this, afterwards, we went to talk to the Puntu Kunti, Raman, and Pinikura peoples, PKKP, and also non-indigenous organizations. It's important to say that, in fact, the PKKP was the only organization who could be part of the project, but we approached many PBCs, and the same happened with non-indigenous organizations. And we had in industry, some organizations from industry, government, research organizations, and non-governmental organizations as well, part of it. We developed some yarns with PKKP and interviews with non-indigenous organizations, asking what would be the barriers and opportunities to develop an RCEAM here in Australia. And for our surprise, both groups agree on the barriers and opportunities, mostly. And what they raise aligns as well with the results of the literature review. And to summarize, the barriers found were late mine closure plans with little involvement of indigenous organizations, poor engagement with indigenous people, Western scientific significance of indigenous values as a barrier, no data sharing, non-inclusive decision-making, inadequate legislation at state level and federal level as well, lack of government capacity, time and budget issues, and lack of capacity as well from both sides, if you can say it this way, from PBCs, from indigenous organizations, and from non-indigenous organizations as well, to undertake RCEAM. In fact, another thing is the awareness and knowledge about what is RCEAM and how to perform the process of assessment and management is really low for everybody. This is another point that is important to consider. And the agreed opportunities are early engagement is necessary, capacity building for everybody is necessary, co-leadership during the whole process, regional agreements, and regulatory reforms. What would be the key insights so far? So what do we realize that it's important to consider not only impact avoidance and mitigation, but also positive change, environmental, social, and economic change. Another point is a shift from tokenistic consultation to genuine co-leadership from the earliest stage of a project. It's essential. Legislative reform is required that recognizes Indigenous rights and data sovereignty. And the first important thing is there is a strong alignment across First Nations, industry, government, and community for implement an RCEAM framework rooted in Indigenous values here in Australia. What moves us to not only to continue the project, but to acknowledge the importance of thinking of it and of developing it and implementing here in Australia. The other one, Jess, please. What's the most important thing that you need to consider for post-mine planning and diversification? From the project results, it's about considering RCEAM principles since the early stage of a project. And what does it mean? It means co-leadership with Indigenous communities. From the Canadian models, we see that co-leadership can be co-developed with industry, co-managed with the state, or independent. It means performed completely by the Indigenous organizations. Consider Indigenous rights, relationships, processes, and outcomes. This figure here shows how the rights are the foundation of everything. How relationships, they are important through the whole process, and long-term relationships to ensure that the right process and the right outcomes are in place. Being values-driven and place-based, the assessment being values-driven and place-based as it changed from community to community, culture to culture. And the importance of the assessment and management be systemic and holistic, considering Indigenous perspectives. Knowledge integration, it means how Western science can support Indigenous assessment and management, and vice versa, how Indigenous methods and methodologies can support Western science frameworks. And adaptive management, it means that the landscape changed, people changed, culture changed as well, and you need to track it over time. The other one, Jess. And what do people need to make decisions? We think that partnerships are really important, and also co-management agreements, legally binding. This is what came up. The importance of ensure that co-management is ensured for all parties, and shared decision-making spaces are set up. It means that partnerships must be in place since the beginning of a mining project, not only at the late stage of the mine, post-mine or mine closure. And the whole process must be agreed between the parties involved. It means, and this is the RCEAM framework that we came up with, and this framework, this process includes initiation phase, scoping phase, retrospective assessment, and prospective assessment. So agreeing on the process, it's important. Agreeing on the parallel process, it's important. And agreeing on a third space process, it's important as well for decision-making and implementation. What to be implemented, what to be decided among the parties. And it means that the whole process is rooted in principles, the principles that we saw before, and they have limits. What are the limits? The limits in this case are the values of Indigenous communities to be respected and protected. So those principles, this process based on those principles and driven by those values, it's the final results or the final stage of the whole RCEAM process to be brought together with Western science processes to negotiation and dialogue by the end of the day. And what we can say is by doing this, we will have evidence-based to provide and to develop effective regional planning, effective post-mine land use plannings as well. The good news here is the experience that PKKP had with Rio Tinto in relation to a heritage co-management agreement with the company, where they built this shared space for negotiation. I mention this because it proves that it's possible. And what would be the question now is, what would be the pathway to broaden the spectrum of co-management agreement towards the development of an IRC framework? The last one, Jess. So thank you, and I'd like to thank the partners of the project, and specifically the PKKP Aboriginal Corporation, and also the steering committee, the technical advisory committee, and the First Nation advisory team as well. Thank you so much.
Always having trouble with the mute, so thank you, Raquel, and another great presentation. We have some questions already, and I have some more questions. But the good news is we do have a little bit of time to answer these questions. Let's start with the one from Ashley, which I think is particularly for you, Jess. Is there an understanding about the relationship between a future and a region's DNA, what their value has been, and how they see themselves in working in the Gippsland region? I get a sense that a future must incorporate a version of their current sense of self. Do you want to have a go at that question?
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and thanks, Ash. I can talk to you about this for a very long time. One thing I've noticed by visiting other mining regions and other coal regions in particular, I've had a look around the Latrobe Valley and I can't find a miners' memorial. And if you went down the main street of Morwell, unless you looked either along the train line or along the freeway along the way, you wouldn't actually know you were in a mining area. So I think we need to not only acknowledge the DNA here, but promote it. We've done a bit of erasure here in the valley, and I think we need to actively acknowledge it in order to be able to move forward. But of course, involve young people in what they want that vision to be as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess. And we have some comments here and questions here from Will Rifkin, which I think are for everyone on the, for all the speakers. So maybe we start with we'll go backwards. Maybe start with you, Raquel, and then Taryn, and then Jess. So many great insights, well done in those 3 studies. Who is the audience for the reports? Are you telling government? And if so, who in government who can make a difference? Or what are you doing to get the message across to various audiences in different sectors to hear those messages, and any co-design workshops for these target audiences? An outcome from gaining such research understandings might not be a report per se, but a campaign. From that perspective, what can Listen Today do to help? Thank you very much, Will Rifkin, for that question. Raquel, did you want to maybe respond initially to Will? Any aspect of those questions?
Yes, and Will is part of our project as well. He is leading the governance package of the project, what is great. The first thing, you are asking too much, Will. Who is the audience for the reports? Everybody. As you see, we went to the Indigenous organizations. In fact, it's interesting, this question, because here we focus on Indigenous organization, government, industry, research, but local communities, they are not involved here yet. So, and those voices are really important to be heard as well, but let's go step by step. So for now, the audience is everybody, because what we are doing, regardless if it's based on, in fact, in our project, what we do is we are approaching the RCEAM framework from the Western science perspective and from the Indigenous perspective, and how those perspectives together somehow can benefit the whole landscape, and the landscape not on the physical landscape, but community and culture as well. So I think that the audience is everybody. And as somebody from ourselves, from the local community perspective, in my perspective, it's important as well. So this is some limitation of, I can say, a limitation of a limitation or a movement forward that we need to take later. The other thing is who in government, policymakers, for sure, and regulators as well. How in the way that will frame the way for the development and implementation of an RCEAM, and in fact for RCEAM, because RCEAM it's not something that's separate from the whole process; it's together. But how? And this is why the third space is really important. What are you doing to get the message across the various audiences and in different sectors? We are starting doing this now. This is the first webinar, the first time that we are disseminating those ideas and findings from our research. And the proposal is to keep doing this here through CSC Time and other organizations, and any organization that's interested in listening a little bit more about the project. It's welcome. We are here to do this. And the other one, avenues for genuine input beyond standard consultation process and impact beyond the panel deliberation themselves. All the deliberative process, it comes to governance, is something that in terms of the research, we have some examples from Canada, in Norway, basically. And I think that the next step is what would be the tools, the instruments, and the pathways to do here, to build or to do here in Australia. So this is part of our next stage, as the next stage of the project, that it's more about implementation and tools and methods to implement it.
Taryn, did you want to add anything to Raquel's response to this question from Will Rifkin?
Yes, thank you. And I'm not going to answer the series of questions because there's so many. Well, our projects have always intended to provide support to practitioners of regional planning, and that can be people at different levels of government as well as industries. And as the project has come to an end, we are looking at different way of sharing the findings from the project. Today's webinar is an example. Of course, also having in briefing notes will be more accessible to a greater body of audience. And we're also having a wrap-up meeting with the two advisory groups to ask them for recommendations in terms of how can the findings of the project be more useful in terms of landing into the right hands and shaping future actions. Within the project team, we had our own, we had reflections about, if we were to do a future research project, how would it look like? And one of the ideas, it's around living labs. And it's centered on that we learn from these projects that our case study participants, they have a really good understanding of what are their challenges. So it's not so much about just having another project to articulate differently what their challenges are. And oftentimes where the barrier is that gap between the knowledge and actions. And we come up with the idea of living lab is because we said we actually need an experimental space to bring together actors that have the resources as well as the authority to make change happen, to have the commitment to experiment different way of doing, different way of collaborating, different way of addressing the challenges that they have identified. So then the research itself is not just research about information or tool, but the research itself is about experimenting different way of practice. So Well, hopefully we'll keep on championing an idea, and maybe CRC time will support that. Or I think having even just webinar like that is already getting as a way of getting the message out. Thanks.
Thanks, Taryn. And the questions are coming to, they're flowing in right now. So Jess, if you want to add anything to Will's question, please do. But perhaps the next question from Erin Bahansky is perhaps particularly relevant to you. So Erin's asking, was the community interested principally in having a deliberative space and a greater voice, or in identifying avenues for genuine inputs and impact beyond the panel deliberations themselves? Or in other words, what next after the discussions end? So do you want to feel free to contribute anything else to Will's question, but there are some other questions here, so perhaps maybe respond to Erin.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and thanks, Erin, for your question. So we've got the situation in the Latrobe Valley where obviously people are distressed around the mine closures. Some of them are excited, but if you're working there, it's a bit of an uncertain future. And there's still some uncertainty about what the final landforms are going to be and the community's role in that, which is quite minimal. Essentially, it's a technical decision to be made between the operators and the regulators, with some community opinion put into that, but they don't get to make the decisions about it. So the community are distressed and change is happening, and we wanted to provide a platform where they could actually have some say in something tangible. So this is where we moved the agenda to firstly the land around the mines rather than the mine voids themselves, and getting them to think about a future state and what they would like that to be. So having a deliberative space over something that they could have some agency in was really important. And I think that addresses the question that's a bit further on about fatigue as well. Asking the people the same questions about what they think about something and then getting a report and then going back 3 months later and asking the same question is where the fatigue comes in. But if people can actually see that their opinions are being heard and held and used and referred to, that's a very, very different thing. So I think, yeah, and the question that we asked in our recruitment was about what's the positive future that you want to see for the region? It wasn't, what do you think about mine closure? What do you think about the pit voids? It's about helping them craft what this vision could be. So it's in the framing of the question as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess, and thanks also touching on Peter Dowling's question. Taryn, did you want to add anything to Peter Dowling's question, which I can read out for anyone who's not monitoring the chat? With stakeholder engagement central to these projects, are there any observations on whether our stakeholders are consulted out, which may impact on future work?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think that stakeholder fatigue is a concern. Work as a scientist working in the space of co-production, my motto has always been that what is the benefit and the value that I bring to the people that I work with, because they are contributing their time and their resources. Our project originally have hoped that by the end we will have a local scale analytical tool that can be used, and unfortunately the tool is in a prototype stage. Therefore, it hadn't progressed as far along as we would have wished it to be. But I think that as a project, we have to continue to think about, well, we've learned all these great insights. What can we do to bring this knowledge to bear? I think that's one of the way of paying back to the participants who give their time and resources to contribute to projects.
Awesome. So look, we do have a few more questions to go. I'm going to just cut to a couple which are in the open Q&A part. So it's a sort of slightly different tab here. So one by Jane, which I think is for you, Raquel. Did you say develops an agreement with Rio Tinto? So that's just a question about that, something you said there with Rio Tinto?
Yes, no, not me, PKKP.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yeah.
I'm just mentioning that they have this agreement with Rio Tinto that's being seen as good practice.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. And while we're here on the Q&A tab, how do communities work through the multi-generational aspect of mine life and closure? And then with capital investment for future use, how do communities raise capital for new opportunities that may have variable timeframes? So any comments about that one from, maybe we go back to you, Jess, if you want to start with that one.
Yeah, look, this is a really tricky one, and I've just typed a reply to Will's comment in the chat. This question of future ownership, I think, is really challenging, of who owns the problem going forward, or the opportunities as well. The multi-generational aspect is a challenging one for the community to understand and engage with. Like, come and engage in a consultation that you won't see the results of for 20 years. It's similar, like, to many of the climate change discussions. You know, you're not going to see it in your lifetime, but we need to bear the brunt of the responsibility now. So yeah, I think that is challenging. We came up with some great solutions in the Indigenous deliberations about having what was referred to as an Aboriginal Future Fund, to be able to put seed money going forward, so that when traditional owners may get access to some of these lands going forward, that they actually have an economic incentive to start with, that they can start building their plans for self-determination around. So yeah, definitely investing now in what the future state is going to be, and not waiting for some great investment to come later.
Thanks, Jess. So we also have a question from Cyan Edwards. I was wondering, Raquel, maybe you want to respond to this one initially, and then we can move to those speakers. Do you think this research means that closure provisions or the mechanisms of gathering provisions need to change, with critical minerals areas set to open up under pressure to deliver quickly? What can be quickly done to ensure this gets addressed up front with closure planning requirements? Did you want to have a go at that one, Raquel?
Nothing can be done quickly in this space now, but things can be done in the right way, even if they are supposed to be quick. In fact, they are not supposed to be quick. This is the main point. And those partnerships, they are related to long-term partnerships and ongoing partnerships. So it's not about approvals. It's not about just having the results in the time that industry, or even government, or even us, local, normal people, want to. It's about understanding the complexity of this landscape. It's about a mindset shift from getting results to building partnerships and relationships. They are robust through the whole process of a project. We are talking about project, but it means to the whole thing, all development, even our urban developments as well, not only mining, any development, and how people can be included in this, and how the landscape can be listened to.
Well, thank you, Raquel. That's a great response. What I think we need to do now is actually say a few words to close up. There's more in the discussion. There's some comments. I'd like to thank everyone for their comments and their questions. We didn't get to the questions that I was going to ask, but one of the things I did want to note was just how important the role of process was. It's something that you touched on, Taryn, but it was actually in all of the presentations today. The process for decision making, the process for collaborating, and what we actually mean by region and how that relates to what that process is. I think these are central questions which we're all contributing to, and 3 fabulous presentations all engaging with these important issues. So please, everyone, join me in thanking the presenters, and just a reminder that we do have that toolkit, which we mentioned in the beginning. So the regional collaboration toolkit on the website, which was posted in the chat, but we can possibly just post it again now. And once again, thank you, Jess, thank you, Taryn, and thank you, Raquel.